Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and for the next 30 minutes to an hour or so, I've got with me someone that I've probably had the best interactions with over at Clay Clark's Reawaken America tour. That's not to say I'm having all these horrible interactions behind the scenes, but when I talk to a lot of these people, either they're extremely naive on some issues, or in my opinion, so far off in fantasy land and not grounded in any sort of reality that I question their motives or their sanity. I have to be honest with you. But it's been rather refreshing talking to this gentleman. He has a show over on TNT Radio. He's also part of the MAGA Institute. And by the way, you can check that show out right over here at tntradio.live, and you just look for The Reckoning with Timothy Shea. How are you, sir?
I am well, Jason. Thank you. Yeah, we've had some good times, some good laughs. You two get it. We're not going to use the G word for grifter, but there's sometimes you kind of wonder why people are there because they don't seem to have the depth of knowledge that you'd expect, or other things going on. And some people, God love them, they mean well, and they have all the best intentions in the world, but they've just not been around politics very much, and they don't know how it works, and they don't realize that, the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind finely. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes you got to be patient, and sometimes you got to use a little bit of discernment too, right, brother?
Exactly. And largely what you've been involved in are free and fair elections, getting people registered, making sure that people are aware of the type of gerrymandering issues that are really there, and different district riggings, the ballot harvesting, now the mail-in ballots, and so much more. But you were in the arena before that, and there's a plethora of other things I want to talk about. But let's, I guess, go over your run up to the midterm after 2020, and then the actual results, because one of the things we talked about before the election was there are a lot of people with high hopes and big talk of this massive red wave now that the COVID 1984 restrictions hadn't been pulled back. But you were one of the more realistic people that were saying that's going to take a lot of work, and we're definitely not out of the woods because we haven't changed the infrastructure.
Well, that's exactly right. Look, we've got three corrupt branches of government, right? We've got corrupt executive branches, secretaries of state, changing the rules because of an emergency. Jason, I've read the Constitution. I've studied the Constitution. I've even taught the Constitution a little bit. I missed the clause that has the emergency exception, where it says, yeah, but none of this counts if there's an emergency. I missed that amendment. It's not in any of the articles. So we've got a corrupt executive branch in a lot of states, and certainly at the federal level, right? You've got President Trump's own administration actively working to oppose him, undermine him, disregard direct orders, and all the rest. You've also got a corrupt legislative branch, right? Both federally and in certain states. And then you've got the corrupt judicial branches. We see judges making decisions. For example, in North Carolina this week, the Democrat Supreme Court, right before it goes, it's 5-4 Democrat now. It's about to be 7-2 Republican in January. So they just decided a case that the House districts were okay, but the Senate districts that were drawn were unconstitutional, suppress the black vote, etc. And I do need to correct you on this one thing. It's gerrymandering with a hard G. Is named after Elbridge Gerry, Massachusetts governor, and it's spelled Gerry, but his name is Gary, so it's gerrymandering.
Well, no, I'm glad. You learn more every day, and I am not perfect by any means. The more you know.
Well, I have a PhD in useless knowledge, so there's some of it. So you got the Supreme Court saying the House districts can stand, but the Senate districts have to order it back to the lower courts to redraw the districts. Okay, mm-hmm. I've got a problem with that. I don't have a problem with courts reviewing legislative action and determining it to be constitutional, unconstitutional, according to the laws, or violating the laws. I've got no problem with that. But I do have a problem with the remand. The remand should have been to the legislature. Go back, do it again. Not to the lower courts. We got to get courts out of the job of drawing district lines. It's not what the courts are for. It's not how they should be used. Unfortunately, that got all the publicity. The real part of the decision that is unfortunate is that they also overruled the 2019, I think it was 2018, voter ID law that North Carolinians passed. And their reasoning is the same old tired racist Democrat reasoning that black people don't have the ID they need to register to vote, which is it's ludicrous on its face, and it's patronizing. It's the racism of the soft racism of low expectations, is how my former Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan put it, right? So what I am advising is Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson or another prominent black North Carolina Republican to come out and do an ad against the Democrats and saying, you can't get ID? What, are you kidding me? It was Andrew Dice or Steven Crowder, one of these guys went out and did the man on the street interviews, and they went to Santa Monica Pier, where all our favorite people are that don't know, who we fought in the Civil War. True story. He went out there and asked, who did America fight in the Civil War? And nobody knew.
And talk about low expectations. People, right? I mean, they've changed the education system so much and expected so little from everybody. Let's talk about that for a second. That we do now have a society where people don't understand it was what? North versus the South. We fought each other. It was quote unquote a civil war. But they're the same people on the peripheral that supposedly, according to the mainstream narrative, saved the midterms, the Gen Zers, for the Democrats. And the big talking point is now a modern civil war against people like yourself, MAGA, and quote-unquote white supremacy. So, I mean, think about how wild that is, to your point that most of these people don't even know what the Civil War was at all. It's being invoked now. And then again, the narrative, just like Joe Biden's the most popular president ever, 81 million votes, is that it was Gen Z that saved the election. I heard someone say it the other day, Timothy. What are your thoughts on what saved the election for the Democrats?
Well, and God love them. They want to lower the voting age now to 16, right? You can't drink until you're 21, but you can vote for.
It's not just drink. They've taken away cigarettes. This is one of the weirdest things I've seen. Like over the last 5-10 years, I've noticed it. And that was kind of the thing. You had cigarettes in school because, obviously they were the older kids and they'd go outside and smoke. It was obviously more socially accepted. The vaping thing has taken off, but they've pushed that to 21. I'm sorry, but if you could take a bullet for your country and go shoot a brown person because someone in a starred uniform told you to, you should be able to drink. Now, if you want to...
It's even worse than that. It's even worse than that. If you can go into the military and get shot at 18, you come home, you can't have a pew-pew until you're 21.
Again, it makes absolutely no sense other than to control your life socially further and have you bend the knee. Common logic doesn't have to make sense. For instance, it doesn't make sense to do random audits of 10% of the machines and the ballots. It doesn't make sense to do it for 5%. Hell, it doesn't even make sense to do it for 3%, which was the bare minimum that Jimmy Carter and Baker said back in the day. Everybody talks about the mail-in ballots in their commission. They also warned you about the machines. Speak to that aspect of really voting in general over the last decade and a half, really taking off after the Bush-Gore presidency and becoming more and more prominent. These machines and the inability to audit in any meaningful way.
Well, I'm going to go back even further than that, okay? Because my political career started at 6 years old, 1968. I'm out leafleting with my dad. My cousins ran the Democrat Party in Syracuse. Our next door neighbors out to the lake ran the Republican Party. So I got to see both behind the curtain from a very early age. Worked campaigns all my life, doing the door-to-door thing, doing the smiling and dialing at night thing, back old school retail politics, right? And ran for office myself. I was an elected town meeting member in Massachusetts. I was elected to the town Republican committee. So I've been around. I've been delegates to the Massachusetts State Convention. I've been around a little bit. We used to call the voting machines in New York State one-arm bandits because it was those old metal machines. I don't know if you've ever even seen one, but it's a big metal box with arms that come out with a curtain. And the curtain's open, and you walk in, and there's a big lever in front, and you slide it to the right, and the curtain's closed behind you, and then all of the levers activate. And there's a little tiny lever over each candidate, and you flip down the ones where you want to vote, right? And then when you're done, you take that big handle and you slide it back to the left. The curtain's open, and your vote is recorded. Well, just like the old slot machines in Las Vegas could be rigged, these things could be rigged, right? We called them one-arm bandits. Everybody knew they were cheating. Everybody knew that in New York City and in the cities, they were using these machines to cheat. And Republicans still got elected. In fact, James Buckley, William F. Buckley's brother, was elected as U.S. Senator from the Conservative Party. He didn't run as a Republican. He ran as a conservative. We have a conservative party here. And I'm a registered conservative. And those days are long gone, right? Dinkins was the last time they used those machines that I can recall. And they found a cache of them. It was like 10 or 12 of them, I think, in a school. And, oh, we forgot to pick up these machines. These machines were put back in a storeroom. Well, we've gone, Jason, from so cheating has been around as long as elections have been around because that's human nature.
Yep. Let's talk about that just a second. Like ballot stuffing has always been there. Corruption has always been embedded in elections. And the way that they sell you on these new technologies is that they're going to be safer and more secure, right?
Right. And they're not. They're not. So the technology platform changes. Look, New York State didn't even have secret ballots until the early 1900s. It used to be a public record who you voted for. So what Boss Tweed and his Tammany Hall boys would do is they'd go down the docks, meet all the Irish and the Italians coming off, and they'd say, "You want a job? You want a place to live? Okay, here you go. Go to the ward healer. We'll get you all signed up, and you're going to vote for Boss Tweed, right? You're going to vote Democrat." And then they look, and if you don't vote Democrat, guess what? You lose your house, you lose your job. So you vote Democrat, right? That's how it works. And then the reform came through and said, no, we got to have secret ballots because people can't be pressured, can't have their livelihood threatened, et cetera. And so then, like, it's an all-Democrat neighborhood, so they know if somebody votes Republican, they pretty much know who it is. It's that loudmouth that was spouting off at the pub last Friday, and so out he goes. So there's been problems all along. Nothing's perfect, right? That said, we knew they were cheating. We knew it was going on. We had some safeguards in place. Things were pretty good. With these computer systems, they blatantly violate the law by not. They don't follow any of the requirements. These election boards, right? So they don't. They blatantly violate the law, and then they play hide and seek with the data. You subpoena the data. Katie Hobbs erases it all, right? How that right there is a crime. But again, we're in a post legal world where Democrats don't suffer for their crimes. Hillary Clinton gets to delete 33,000 emails under subpoena, no penalty. She gets to put classified documents on a server, no penalty. She gets to destroy Blackberries and phones with a hammer, no penalty. So Katie Hobbs does the same thing. She erases all the thumb drives the day before they were to be turned over. And so she turned over blank thumb drives and said, oh, they'd gotten erased. And there's no penalty for any of this. And that's really the root source of frustration. It was 10, 15 years ago when Democrats were warning about these machines. Liz Warren and other prominent Democrats were accusing Republicans of cheating with the machines. It's like, if the Republicans were cheating with the machines, how did Barack Obama get elected? Okay, that's number one. But the point is, we've got video of them complaining about the machines, and now the machines are the best thing since penicillin. So I think we can all agree the machines are crooked, the elections are crooked, and we really got to get to a place where every American that's legally eligible to vote is able to vote and can be confident that their vote counted.
You know, it's funny that you say we live in this post-legal world, because one of the things that we've discussed, again, behind the scenes, is the fact that we haven't had any substantial and real prosecutions of anybody within the executive bureaucracy that we've seen in my entire life, really, other than Iran-Contra, where there were some convictions of some semi-prominent individuals, many having their sentences eventually commuted or being pardoned. We have to put that out there. We came across maybe Scooter Libby.
I was just going to say, Scooter got a little slap on the wrist.
And he was pardoned by Trump later. You know, let's speak to that right now, because one of the main themes at the Reawaken America tour is prosecute Fauci, right? We've been talking about this for a very long time. Now there's a slim majority in the Congress. There's a lot of people kind of jumping on the bandwagon, trying to, you know, be a mouthpiece for, oh, we're going to do something. And there's only been a few in the Senate that even went after this guy. Obviously, Rand Paul and Ron Johnson being the most prominent of those gentlemen. My belief is no matter what hearings they have, Anthony Fauci will not be criminally held accountable for anything that he has done. And
yeah, he'll be sharing the same jail cell that Hillary Clinton will be.
Exactly. So my question to you, is there anybody in the food chain that they might serve up as a scapegoat, perhaps a Peter Daszak or somebody below him, to try to manage this narrative, show that there's some accountability, and at the same time, I believe, try to solidify the idea that this indeed was a leak, a lab leak, or an accident, and not allow any discussion of a seeded bioattack?
Well, they might throw somebody under the bus. They always do. They threw this this black kid down in Philly under the bus for voting regularities, as they like to call them, some shenanigans. Okay, I'm Irish. Don't take our word from us. Shenanigans has Jason, the connotation, the denotation we all know, right? So they're using it correctly technically, but shenanigans has a kind of impish, boyish, boys will be boys quality to it, right? Knock it off with your shenanigans, as the boy dips, you know, teacher says, as the boy dips the girl's pigtail in the old ink pot, right? It's kind of a little bit good natured, a little bit, you know, impish, fun, right? So shenanigans, these aren't shenanigans. These are felonies. Let's be very clear about that. These are felonies.
Listen, when we're talking about voting, this is allowing the system to flourish in corruption and deception, and that's what enables these bureaucracies to do what they did with their mandates and their techno-medical fascist tyranny. So, like, they're all connected, right? And like you said,
I mean, my background's in biology and chemistry, right? I was calling this stuff out. When they were out with the breathless, the R value, the R naught value, the R naught value. It's like, well, you can't calculate the R naught value because you don't know how many people have been exposed. Therefore, you don't know what the percentage of infected is. You don't know what the denominator is. So completely forget everything you're hearing about R naught value. That was the first thing. And then they come out with everything. It's not a lab leak. It was some bat bit of pangolin, and then somebody made a bowl of soup out of the bat. It's like, yeah, that's not what happened.
Well, let's stop, because you just said something really key right there. And I harped on this in sort of a different way. You talked about you didn't know how many people had actually been exposed to the virus. I always said, you know, they're sitting here talking about how many people are asymptomatic. I go, all right, so all these people are asymptomatic. So shouldn't we know the infection rate versus the people that actually have effects from the virus to start? And then how many people, again, something that just went away during the last 2 to 3 years, wouldn't they have some type of natural immunity? And natural immunity was never in the discussion then and continues not to be in the discussion now, despite the fact that Bill Gates recently was on camera probably about 3 to 6 months ago, where he talked about the fact that the virus itself worked as a very effective vaccine. And that was sadly, he literally prefaced it with sadly, Timothy. That shows you the insanity of all of this, when that's the same guy that completely projected in April of 2020. Baseline, you would be taking 3 to 5 shots. Wasn't a shocker to me, folks. He went on TV and told you. And then it would be annual or biannual, Timothy.
Yep. and it's all completely needless, right? It's basically a common cold now. So I was out against the R0 value. I was out in April 15th. I was on Mike Moore's True Pundit podcast right after Robert Kennedy Jr. and warning people about the coming mRNA vaccines. Okay, so I was out in April of 2020. They weren't available on the market until December. I was already warning about them because, trained as a biologist, I understand the technology, and I knew what the problems were going to be. And sure enough, everything. Sadly, this is real. Sadly, what I predicted has come true. Let me just get back though to the story about North Carolina.
Okay.
Right. So what they're saying is the blacks are either too stupid or too lazy to get ID. They don't have ID, which is patently and demonstrably false. So Steven Crowder or Dice, one of these guys goes out, Mark Dice goes out on Santa Monica Pier and asks all the white lunatics who don't know who we fought in the Civil War whether voter ID laws were racist. And every single one said yes. Why? Because, well, people don't have ID and blah, 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 blah. Then went up to Harlem on 125th Street and started asking black people and Hispanic people whether they had. And one woman just looked at him like he had 6 heads and says, Chad, I was 6 hours at the DMV yesterday. I know how to get ID. I have ID. I'm willing to do what I need to do to get ID. Mm-hmm. So every single person up in Harlem said it was absurd. They laughed. It was absurd to say that we don't have ID, right? So again, this is the soft racism of the Democrats here. Low expectations. We're going to be patronizing. We're going to treat these people as though they're still our property. So I'm advocating that Mark Robinson or some other prominent North Carolina Republican comes out and accuses the Democrat Party, calls them out on their racism, saying, this is absurd. So unfortunately, now we no longer have the voter ID requirement in North Carolina, but I'm sure that the legislature will reintroduce it and the new Supreme Court will rule it valid. And, they'll do a minor tweak of the law to say this law is different than the last law. But I mean, come on, folks, let's get over this. The minorities can't get ID. It's just it's disgusting, really.
Again, you're saying that, number one, they don't have a car. Number two, they can't really have gainful employment anywhere, legitimately or legally, and that they're not a part of the system somehow. And look, I'm all for personal freedoms. I know there are some people out there that want to be a sovereign citizen, Timothy, or, exactly want to do all these things and live without identification. But let's be honest with ourselves. The vast majority of us that go anywhere or do anything in the country, which also includes flying, have identification, period. And there's a whole other swath of people that have let's say we're going to the lowest of the low expectation, my friend, where they don't fly, they don't travel, they don't work legitimately, they're underground. A lot of people like to drink. So they like to go to the bar. Let's be honest. No matter what your color is, no matter what race, you like to drink. So some people literally just get an ID so that they can get cigarettes or now vaporizers and alcohol legally and marijuana in many states now. So when are we going to go?
I carry my ID with me.
Oh, it's right there. You got the Neuralink?
Oh, I've had it since I was 36. Yeah. So every time I go in, I'm 60 years old. I just turned 60. When I go in to the supermarket, they ask me for my ID. I just say right here.
Yeah, they're good to you?
Yeah.
I mean,
they just laugh and they say, okay, what year were you born? And they punch it in and they're okay, you're good to go.
It depends on where you're at, man. You're an upstate New York guy. There are certainly places where I go in New York where they just straight won't sell anything to you unless you have something because they have to scan it according to, their policy.
Well, and now you've brought up the other thing, the scanning, right?
Yeah.
This global surveillance network that we're having. We've got police people. This should terrify you. Where is the ACLU? Where are all the Democrat civil liberties lawyers? Where is Dershowitz on this? Where is everybody on the left on this issue? You've got 80 FBI agents sitting in a cubicle reviewing people's social media posts, not pursuant to a warrant, zero probable cause, just reviewing what you're saying publicly. That should chill to the bone every single American.
Well, I would say this. Let's go beyond that, because this is another thing that I've been harping on for a while. This article now, a year and a half plus old, is going to be, before I know it, folks, going to be 2 years old, and no one's done a follow-up on it, and none of these documents are available to the public. Exclusive inside the military's secret undercover army, the largest undercover force the world has ever known. I'll just repeat that. The world has ever known. Forget about the brown shirts. All right, we talk a lot about Nazis these days. This is the biggest one ever. It was created by the Pentagon over the past decade. It has some 60,000 people that now belong to the secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called signature reduction. Doesn't even have an official name. It's an art form in the paperwork. Yep. The force, more than 10 times the size of the clandestine elements of the CIA, carries out domestic, and foreign assignments, both in military uniform and under civilian cover in real life and online, so they're bots and real, sometimes hiding in private businesses and consultancies, some of them household name companies. They're utilizing these systems as Trojan horse civilian systems. They're still heavily embedded in Twitter. Why do you think they have all those intelligence officials there? And that's just the beginning. All right, that's just what you publicly know about.
Facebook was designed. Facebook was literally developed as a platform to get us to spy on ourselves. What do you think all of those, what are your favorite record albums? You know, what are your favorite musicians? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite movies? What are your favorite albums? What are your favorite everything? What do you think let's take the age challenge, put up a picture of you 10 years ago and a picture today, and we'll show you what you're going to look like in 10 years. Folks, you're just teaching the AI. Come on, wake up.
No, I realized about like the launch of Instagram, which I never got into. I think I've got 2 Instagram posts out there, and they're actually little.
I used to use it to post my food.
Yeah, that's one of the things that pulled me back. I was like, do I need people knowing my diet or seeing me in personal lives? And do I have to really? So I never did Instagram. The only time I did Instagram was when I was running a bar in upstate New York, and we had to run that page. So I had to actually do the beer specials and whatever new T-shirts and stuff. So that was like a job. And then I've always treated social media from that point, probably at the demise of MySpace, as a job. In other words, 99.99% of the time, you're not going to see me post pictures with my family or my friends or what I'm doing or where I am or tagging. It's just going to be news. It's just going to be videos that I do, etc. And there was a time when the algorithm would allow that. But as that stuff became the stuff people actually wanted and the stuff that would go viral, they then utilized the algorithm against that type of stuff and promoted not only the celebritard culture that we're embedded in, but the selfies and the shorter videos, and even
it's done a circle, right? So when I first learned about Facebook, I'm in Boston, and I couldn't get it because you had to have an harvard.edu email address in order to use Facebook when it first came out. And so I was waiting, and when it first was available to the public, I got on and I saw what it was about, and I realized what a time sink it was. It's like, I know what the New York Yankees did last night. I don't have any interest in what Kim Kardashian and her slut sisters are doing, and this other stuff doesn't matter to me, so I'm not going to waste my time on it. And so for 5 years, I wasn't on it. And then we used it for my college reunion, or 25th reunion. And so I got on with some college friends. And it wasn't until 2012 really that I discovered the political conversation. Mm-hmm. And then I started using Facebook solely for the politics stuff, my Radio Red Nation Rising and that whole audience and all of my, snark and whatnot. And I used Insta for the human interest stuff, the non-political stuff. I would make it a great meal, and I'd take a picture of it and post that, or I do a video, how to make corned beef or whatever, and put that up. So, and then I started on Twitter, and I'll never forget, Patty Heffernan got me to start a Twitter account. It was October 30th. It was the day before Halloween in 2014. And by the end of November, I had almost 10,000 followers. Mm-hmm. And then over the next 3 years, I only got another 1,500, 1,800.
So yeah, similar story. So like Twitter was the one that I ended up actually liking, that somebody else brought me into. I was like, oh, I don't want another social media feed. And what I knew about it was like Puff Daddy on Ellen DeGeneres. I'm tweeting like, oh, no interest in that.
Yeah, but, again, I wasn't interested. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I realized that, number one, it was short form, like I liked. It was hyperlinks. And instead of Facebook, which was great for me to talk to my high school or college friends or be in touch with my uncle or aunt in a DM, tons of baby mama drama on there. It's, I can't believe he cheated on me. It's all this division. It's all this personal stuff. And I'm just like, oh. And then there's also the friend aspect that you have to confirm or deny being a friend with somebody. And there's actually a connection there with.
I still haven't figured out pokes.
Yeah, I never poked. Anyone that poked, I never poked anybody. Yeah, thank you for bringing that ridiculousness up. I don't even know if that's still a feature, but it was a ridiculous.
I don't either, but I just never. No,
never poked anybody. But then when I realized, hey, I could just follow people, and there is a DM feature for the backdrop here too, so I can also talk to other people, and I don't have to be friends with anybody, and I can cut out all that shit.
Yeah.
And it could all just be almost a news feed and then what interesting people are doing. I think that's why Twitter was very, very effective, right? But again, that algorithm monster gets in there and it starts
They started
slow.
shadow banning me right away, right? So I'm being shadow banned in 2015, 2016, 2017. And then they took my account entirely in 2019. So
you should get it back.
Free at Timbo Tim 62 and free at MAGA Institute 62. Free at MAGA Institute.
Have you checked it yet? You might have it back. They gave the Last American Vagabond back. I was shocked.
Yeah, they're not back. They're not back.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that then, because that's the creeping sense of censorship, right? I had a boom where I think like within the first month I had 10, 15,000 followers. I've been able to amass up to like 33,000, very slow crawl since, working, putting everything up there. I've never had one video that I've posted ever go viral on Twitter. And the only traction I've ever gotten really on Twitter was when Joe Rogan used to retweet my account, or the people from The Blaze during COVID retweeted one of my things. That's it. And that's incredible for somebody who even has my size audience over a long period of time.
Right.
These Twitter files that everybody's talking about and having a big whoa, wow. Shouldn't we actually get the files, and shouldn't we be going long before just the censorship we saw via the COVID 1984 nightmare and the 2020 election? You and I both know it goes much further than that. Does this feel like narrative management to you?
No. What Elon said he was going to do, and I trust that he's going to do it, he's putting out the information at first. He's letting two journalists, Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss. And by the way, isn't it amazing all of the pushback from the left on Matt and Barry, and in the anti-Semitism against Barry? Are you kidding me? Come on. And everybody's saying, oh, yeah, they used to be such good journalists. It's a shame they've lost their mind and jumped on the Trump train and blah, 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 blah. Nope, they're the same people. They're just, it's like Whitney Webb. Whitney Webb's not a conservative. She's one of the best journalists out there. Cheryl Atkinson, not a conservative, one of the best journalists out there. These are people that dig in, they find the truth. Annie Jacobson's another one, just great people out there telling the truth. Dr. Naomi Wolf, cannot give her enough credit for calling out the people that she's been calling out. Again, not a conservative, and yet the left treats all these people as though all of a sudden they turned orange. They all went to Donald Trump's tanning salon and they all got orange. It's absurd. And Elon said it after this is done, after these curated threads, because he wanted it to get out in a narrative form to tell the story. And he said after that, the entire database is going to be available. Anybody can go search it. So,
well, I got to look that up, and I think that's a positive thing. I'm extremely skeptical of Musk. Those are other conversations we've had behind the scenes, and even obviously in my presentations via transhumanism. Taibbi, I actually had a large interaction with back in the day when he was at Rolling Stone, and he was bashing loose change. You can find the piece. It's out there. You can still find anything bashing loose change you can eventually find. But, he's another one. I followed his career, and much like Tucker Carlson, I think that these guys have progressed from dismissing anything that was quote-unquote conspiratorial and outside of the mainstream narrative to doing stories where they started doing deep dives themselves with their journalistic background, writing extensive pieces, Taibbi, for instance, on the crash economically of 2008, and eventually what you would see in the quote-unquote movie Inside Job, and how that scam worked, and the lies about war. And really similarly, you see the same thing with Tucker Carlson, right? And Tucker's going further than anybody else out there. He is trying to hold Elon accountable for the fact that you still have intelligence embedded inside of Twitter.
Right.
And recently, he came out last week, and he said that he had somebody on the inside that has actually gone through the JFK documents. The ones that are being withheld clearly show that the CIA was involved in John Kennedy's murder. Mm-hmm. He then followed up this story the next night after he invited Pompeo both nights to come, which he refused, and said, you know what? All these officials that have commented on it, no one's denied the story's real. Everybody's just said that it's illegal for whoever told me that to tell me that. What does that... First of all, this should be front page news everywhere.
Right.
That there's an individual that's claiming that the members inside the United States government killed a president. Period.
Well, and that's not all he said. He said this country is not what people think it is. It's all fake. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge takeaway as well. The "it's all fake" line. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It came out and said it was the bravest newscast in 60 years, which I believe it was. Tucker himself said, did you see him on stage yesterday in Arizona?
I didn't.
Tucker said that he'd known Trump because Tucker's been in media for 30 years now, started in 1992, I think. He said, just being in media, working for NBC, Trump was in that orbit. I've known him for years. I always thought he was kind of a buffoon. Sometimes I still think he is. He can be a bit buffoonish. But two things. So he said, I knew he was going to run for president before he came down the escalator. He goes, I get a text from Donald Trump. And Trump says, I think I'm really going to surprise you. And Tucker said, so I tweeted back, oh, what? You're going to run for president again? Because he ran in 2000 to on the reform ticket for a book of a cup of coffee because he had a book to push. So Tucker said, what? You're going to run for president again? What, do you have another book to sell? And he goes, no, I think I'm going to really surprise you. And then he did. And Tucker said two things. First of all, Trump was asking questions that no one asked. Why are we still funding NATO? And he goes, and I never thought about that. I never asked that question. My dad would work for the government. We grew up with a front row seat to the Cold War. Of course we fund NATO. Why wouldn't we fund NATO? He says. And he said, but Trump said, why are we still funding NATO? And nobody had asked that question. So that really impressed me. And then I saw my neighbors lose their mind when he asked that question. And he said it was their reaction that really got me to look at Donald Trump and see what was really going on. And because somebody said, who you're going to back, DeSantis or Trump? And he's like, and he hearkened back to his interview with Tyson. I know you saw the Tyson interview.
I saw the pieces that he's put on. I haven't watched the whole thing. Sure.
Well, you saw the great clip then when he asked Mike if all the negative publicity and all the hate got to him. And he said, Mike Tyson said one of the most profound things I've ever heard anybody say. When I think I'm somebody, it bothers me. Then when I remember that I'm nobody, it doesn't. And so Tucker said, who cares what I think? He goes, I didn't think Donald Trump was going to get elected president. My record predicting these things is horrible. So why do who cares who I'm going to back? It doesn't matter. Do your own research. Back wherever you think you want to back.
And again, I think he's been more candid, right? Like, people don't understand. First of all, I can't imagine the kind of upbringing he has. He's a trust fund kid, very embedded in the government, very embedded in that scene.
Well, he's the Swanson era, right? Swanson Foods.
Yeah. So I mean, to talk about real nepotism in the United States, in the media arena, in the United States, a lot of people don't understand, if they aren't taking a step back and they're not familiar with these things, that a lot of people that have the key jobs are people that's kids were in millionaire plus families, you know, in these circles, and grew up around these politicians and businessmen and media individuals. And I mean, look, Mike Wallace and Chris Wallace, right?
Yeah.
You really
Well, and it's not entirely a bad thing, right? One of the best writers, one of my favorite writers, perhaps my favorite writer since William Safire passed and William F. Buckley passed, is a guy by the name of Lance Morrow. And I know Lance personally. He's married to my best friend's older sister. And I've had some great conversations with Lance. And he's written some books that are very powerful on his own journey with heart disease. Lance kept getting heart issues right after there'd been a major advancement. He goes, if I'd been 2 years the other side, I'd be dead. But they just came out with this and it saved me. And then they just came out with the stem cell therapy and it ended up saving me. And he wrote a book about that journey. But he also wrote another book called Chief. And it's about his dad. His father was Nelson Rockefeller's speechwriter, right? So Lance was the senior essayist for Time Magazine. The back of Time Magazine, you open the back cover, there's his essay on the left-hand page, every single issue, for years. And he's writing on his own now. But his facility with language, his prose is absolutely beautiful. But the elegance of his mind, right, when he analyzes a situation, he really cuts right to the core of it and expresses beautifully what he thinks. Like a lot of times people use words, but they don't really know how to use them to convey the emotion and the insight that they intend. Lance does. He's my favorite author. He's my favorite living essayist by far. But he's the son of the Nelson Rockefeller's former speechwriter, right? So is nepotism always a bad thing? No. Sometimes it can be a very, very good thing. But you're exactly correct. It's exactly what George Carlin said. It's a big club, and we're not in it. But guess what? We are now, thanks to the internet.
Well, especially in that media sphere. And that's why this foundational narrative that's been growing over the last 10 to 15 years of misinformation and disinformation and now malinformation and now taking it to a level where hate speech and this type of behavior can be criminalized has always been the plan, because the power of speech and reach, by the way, Elon, both, is extremely important. And it's what people need in order to gain the discernment that we can use to move in a better direction, not only as a country, but as humanity in general. And these people want to stomp that out in order to consolidate and control people, in my opinion, based on real misinformation, but in their lack of ability to challenge these narratives that, as we began this broadcast, are many times on their face completely absurd. And that
they are absurd when they're not evil and or racist. I think racism is evil, but I mean, there's evil, racist evil, and then there's non-racist evil from these folks. Howie Carr, the king of drive time talk radio in Boston, he's on the radio every afternoon. He was on after Rush, right? So you'd get 3 hours of Rush, and then you'd get Howie Carr. He's also a columnist for the Boston Herald. He was a neighbor, and I was very good friends. His wife, Kathy, was on our Republican town committee. Our daughters went to school together, so I got to know Howie a little bit. And I was at a party at his house, and I had always wanted, I used to listen to Bob Grant. I'm really aging myself now. I used to listen to Bob Grant when I lived in New York, and he was great. And then Rush came out, though. And Rush changed the game. I was like, I could do that. I'd have a lot of fun doing that. And so I always wanted my own show. And I was talking to Howie about it, and he said, Tim, it's too late. He goes, you're married, you got a mortgage, you got children. He goes, to get into this game, you got to be willing to start out for $15,000, $20,000 and work at a 100-watt station out in Iowa for a few years and slowly build up. And it was great advice for the time. Howie was 100% correct when he told me that. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward to 2014, now I'm the host of Radio Red Nation Rising. I had my own show because of the internet. And I was able to come in and have my own show because when I said I'd always wanted to have a show, it wasn't a velleity. It wasn't just, gee, that would be nice. I had a show I wanted to do. I had a structure. I knew how I wanted it to run. And, that brought me to where I am today. And you had the same situation. Technology is the great leveler. And I told you that story to tell you this story to bring us back to our first story. They always, always, always underestimate the transformative power of technology. They've been saying that we're overpopulating the planet all my life. Back in the 70s, it was a big issue. There's going to be starvation. No, because technology has enabled GPS farming, where we literally don't have any overlap. We don't even have 3 inches of overlap anymore on the crop lines because of the GPS technology on the tractors and the plant the seeds, etc. So technology has enabled us to feed more people. Technology has enabled us to cure more people of disease. Technology always, always, always advances. It doesn't bring us back to a situation before. That's what they can't handle. That's why they want to stifle us and bring us back. That's why they want to control us. The equation is power plus profit equals control, right? If you seek power, if you seek profit, you're going to increase your control. And that's the algorithm they use. And now getting back to Bill Gates, and sadly, COVID-19 acts as its own best vaccine. We've got an overpopulation problem, but if we do a better job with vaccines in the coming decades, we won't have an overpopulation problem. We've all
and reproductive health care.
We've all seen the video, right? I saw a great data representation. So a lot of people aren't good with numbers. They can't wrap their mind around the numbers, but they are really good if the numbers are visualized for them. So this guy took maps around the world and used vertical spikes to show population density, right? So Manhattan, if you look at the United States, like big peaks in Manhattan, big peaks in LA, a little bit smaller peak in Chicago, Detroit, you see where the people live, right? Most of the United States has no people, relatively speaking. And then they did it for the globe and for China, and how 60% of the people in China are on 20% of the landmass, and all this. You could put every single person on the planet. If we stood shoulder to shoulder, you could put every single person within the confines of New York City,
which is tiny, by the way, physically.
Which
people
is tiny.
Don't, super tiny.
Yeah, and that's literally crammed in like sardines, but that's just a representation. If everybody lived in a density that was Manhattan, and Manhattan's dense, but you've been there many times, I know, it's not unlivable, right? So if everybody was Manhattan, we could all fit into Australia.
Yeah.
And the rest of the planet would have not a single person on it. So overpopulation isn't a problem.
I agree, and that's actually one of the things that I agree with Musk on. Even Ray Kurzweil has discussed how it's not an issue. He talks about how really we've only used about 5% of the livable land, and that we are, crammed together in city structures in order to work and play together, and somehow virtual reality is going to empower us not to do that. Yet they still want to put us into cities like Neom and the Line. That we could talk about all those things for a very long time, my friend. We're coming up on an hour. What would you like to leave my audience with today?
Get involved in your local community. Tune out the noise. Tune out the clickbait. Tune out the we're going to have hearings. Hearings mean nothing, because unless you have a Department of Justice that's willing to prosecute, hearings mean nothing. Investigations mean nothing. Criminal referrals mean nothing. Just ask Eric Holder, right? Focus on where you can have an impact, and that's your local school board. That's your town or precinct Republican committee. Find out what organizations are around you that interest you. It can't be another job. You've got to do this. If you're going to be civic minded, you want to actually make a difference in something you care about. Find out what you care about. So I would say, first, ask yourself what you care about. And secondly, find out where in your community you can make a difference on that issue. And thirdly, get up off the couch and go do it.
Damn straight. It is Timothy Shea of the MAGA Institute, and he does The Reckoning. Tell people where they can find that and when they can find that.
Monday through Friday, 5 to 7 Eastern for now, until the clocks change again in April or whenever, March, whenever we do it. So for now, it's 5 to 7 Monday through Friday at tntradio.live. That's tntradio.live. And then magainstitute.com. And again, Elon, please, free at TimboTim62 and at MAGA Institute on Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jason. God bless you.
All right. We'll talk to you later, brother.